Hello, everybody, and welcome back to the Rocky Top Insider Press Pass podcast here on this Wednesday, November 27th edition, Thanksgiving Eve edition of the RTI Press Pass. I'm your host, Jack Foster, backgroundless Jack Foster today. If you're watching, very not me, not like me. I'm a big background guy, but today I have literally zero background. It is a blank wall, and I could not be more disappointed in myself, but it's going to be all right. Home for the holidays, so don't have my normal setup, but we'll be fine. Alongside Ryan Shumpert and Rick Butler, as always. Rick, how you doing on this Thanksgiving Eve?
I'm good. Good to be here with you guys again. Good to be talking a little football. Jack referring to himself as a big background guy is an amazing way to start off this podcast. I would say that's fair to say. I would say that's a good thing to tout. But yeah, excited to be here with you guys. Obviously, basketball in full swing as well. Not that that is the topic of discussion for today, but just so much going on right now, and we'll get into the football side of things here momentarily.
Ryan, how are you doing, my friend?
Doing well. Yeah, you look like you have the exact same background that I have when I go home, and I don't think anything of it. So
you do.
Well,
you both look like you have the same exact background right now, except just Ryan's got a couple shadow boxes in the back above his shoulders.
Yeah,
it is pretty much
true.
the same. And this was my background today was Ryan's background for like 2 years. So,
No, I had the flag way in the background over the bed. Yeah.
That is true.
That is true. We will all have, I think, pretty nice backgrounds and setups here, especially for next football season. So,
oh yeah,
a lot on the plate for the background scene, I guess.
There you go. Mandatory with these video pods. We're going to start today talking about the playoff rankings as we've been doing the last couple weeks. Last week we were talking about how can Tennessee make the college football playoff because the Vols were on the outside looking in. They obviously needed some help. Well, man, they got help, and they got, just more help on top of that. They got so much help last Saturday. It was a massive, massive day for Tennessee on a day in which they played UTEP. It was a great day for the Vols. Obviously, a 56-0 win was nice, especially after a slow start, being able to win by that much. But the chaos that happened around the sport was tremendous for Tennessee's playoff chances. And now Tennessee firmly in the college football playoff, coming in as the 8th team in the rankings last night. Of course, not the 8th seeded team. That would be the 9th seeded team, if I'm not mistaken. But now, Tennessee wins, they're in. That's all you got to do this weekend. Tennessee beats Vanderbilt, you win, and there's now an outside shot Tennessee can host, which we didn't think that was going to be on the table at all. We can get into that scenario here in a minute, but Ryan, it really looks like, barring obviously a Vanderbilt upset win, Tennessee's in.
100%. Yeah, that's no doubt at this point, which was like 97% likely, or maybe not quite 97%, but pretty likely by the time the Ole Miss lost. But you did still have that outside shot of A&M beating Texas, and then Texas staying in front of Tennessee and A&M jumping Tennessee. Like there was that
Indiana
path
staying ahead too. Yeah.
Which I think Indiana would have stayed ahead if that was the case. If it was the difference in making the playoff and not making the playoff, Indiana would have stayed ahead of Tennessee.
I completely agree.
And I think, I can't remember, Rick, I know I said this to a couple people, but I think we talked about that maybe even on our post-game pod, that I was like, all right, now that it's not going to affect who's in the playoff, I think they'll have Tennessee jump Indiana. But yeah, that was certainly good for Tennessee, and then they got all the extra help to fully relieve, or there's just no doubts that Tennessee will be in the playoff with a win. And I think that jumping Indiana is a really big deal from the hosting standpoint, where now we kind of went into last week thinking, all right, Tennessee needs one thing to break their way to make it. Obviously, Tennessee has a much harder game this week against Vanderbilt on the road compared to UTEP. But if Tennessee beats Vanderbilt, you're kind of sitting here saying, all right, they just need one thing to happen, and they will be hosting a playoff game. And whether that's USC beating Notre Dame, or I guess Texas would be up in the air. I kind of think I kind of feel like Tennessee would jump Texas if Texas lost to A&M. So you get that outcome. heck, even a Penn State gets upset, or there's a handful of scenarios that happen, and it feels like Tennessee would have a good chance to jump up a spot and have a home playoff game.
Yeah, the way I see it, Rick, is obviously a Penn State or Notre Dame upset loss would cause Tennessee to host. SC, the Notre Dame upset loss, obviously way more likely, but something that I think is kind of, potentially going to happen here, the way the SEC has gone this year, and just with how many home teams have been able to win these games, especially rivalry games such as a Texas A&M this weekend, is if A&M beats Texas, I do think Tennessee leaps Texas, and even if A&M were to, obviously they go to the SEC championship in this scenario, if A&M beats Georgia, I think, falls below Tennessee as well in that scenario after an SEC championship game loss. So I think no matter what happens, if A&M beats Texas this weekend, Tennessee will host.
Yeah, I think that Tennessee is set up in a pretty good position here going into the final week of the season. You go back to where they were last week. They were the first team out of the playoffs. Not necessarily a spot that you want to be, but you also understand that you're the first team to jump in if something happens, as long as you handle your own business. And obviously, that's exactly what Tennessee did. A 56-0 win over UTEP there on Senior Day. Tennessee's sort of in a similar position now as that first team, I guess, first team in the away grouping, if you will. So if anything happens above them, Tennessee's going to potentially have a chance to move in. Now, obviously, we're talking a little bit more about conference champions and who might go where at that point. But I still think that Tennessee is in a good position here to go out and win. And Jack, you started off, I believe that was you. I guess it had to be one of you. This weekend is everything for Tennessee. It's win and you're in, right? There's not a lot of excuses about this weekend. Yes, I'm sure that the fan base could sit there and they could talk about resume comparisons and things like that. But at its most simplest form, Tennessee just has to beat Vanderbilt in order to get into the playoffs this week. Tennessee just has to beat Vanderbilt in order to potentially even host a playoff game next week or whenever that is in December. So a lot is on the table for Tennessee, but you got to go out there and handle business. But once again, I don't think that Tennessee's in a bad spot. Obviously, there's not a ton that they can do besides just handling their business against Vanderbilt. But they could be in a pretty good position if things start to get a little bit more chaotic like they were last weekend to potentially continue to rise up these rankings.
Yeah, I guess the one question would be if chalk flies the rest of the way, no upset losses this weekend, Texas takes care of business, and then the Longhorns lose to Georgia. Is that enough for Tennessee to leap Texas? I don't think so. I think an 11-2 Texas team, SEC title game loser, will still host over Tennessee. But I think what will happen is that Texas will not fall to 8 where Georgia is now in the seeding. I think Texas will fall to like 7, and that would cause Tennessee to go to South Bend. So I think that if Georgia, of course, wins the league, Tennessee's not going to go to Athens, which is what would happen if the season ended today. And, if Texas loses, like I said, I don't know if they fall to 8. So I think Tennessee, if everything goes as it should, will end up going to Notre Dame, in my opinion.
Yeah, the committee's not going to have Tennessee play Georgia in the first round.
No.
Stunned if that happens.
Cannot,
stunned if they have interconference matchups.
That's what I was, because the Big Ten, I believe there was one. I got to look at the bracket, but Indiana, Penn State as well. I don't think that
could happen.
You think that's more likely?
It's more likely because they haven't played.
I think it'll end up being Indiana 10, going to Austin is would be my projection. But I guess it could happen. I don't know.
My thought is they'll manipulate the rankings however they need to make sure it's not interconference games. There's maybe a little bit more chance of Penn State and Indiana playing since they haven't played in the regular season compared to Tennessee, Georgia, who played less than a month ago.
Right.
You want to make the playoff look pointless. You want to make the playoff look like it devalues the regular season. Have a rematch of a game that happened 3 weeks prior, a month prior, in the exact same building. So I don't think that's going to happen. One thing I will say, well, I guess first is just how plausible it is for some of these teams to lose ahead of Tennessee this week. I mean, Texas is 5-point favorites over A&M, which I don't think that line's a major surprise. The one that did surprise me when I looked at it this morning is Notre Dame's just 7-point favorites over USC. So those games are, very up in the air. While both those games are closer point spreads than Florida Ole Miss was last week, or way closer point spreads than Alabama, Oklahoma were. I guess A&M Auburn was a tighter point spread. I think that settled right around the field goal.
Yeah.
So it's just very plausible. And I guess the thing I would say here that I think is almost when you're projecting potentially Tennessee making the playoffs, it's kind of a which side do you go with here? Because I think in a lot of ways, too many teams lost for Tennessee is almost a better scenario for Tennessee to make a deep run to have been the 11 seed. Because if you're an 11 seed, then you got to upset Penn State or Notre Dame, and then you get Miami in the second game, as opposed to
Oregon
now. They're gonna get Oregon or Ohio State if they're at the 8 or 9. So it's like, yeah, their chances of winning, and I think that's why it's so important for Tennessee to host, because to me, the 9 seed compared to the 11 seed, I'm not even sure there's that big of a difference in like your chances of winning the first round game, except for you now have a significantly worse chance of winning a second game. Whereas if Tennessee can host and be an 8 seed, I feel a lot better about their chances, just how good they've been at home the last handful of years, and in this season specifically. I feel a lot better about Tennessee's chances to win that game before facing Oregon or Ohio State in the game. I have very little confidence in them winning. So I think that part of it, it's just kind of interesting the way it flows, and it kind of goes the same way with like if you're the 7 seed or the 10 seed, because Georgia or Texas, I think it's going to be a hard game, probably an easier game than Ohio State or Oregon. But it's just kind of the interesting things of the matchup, because to me it just feels like 6 to 8 to 9. There's not a huge difference in those teams, at least in my opinion, projecting Tennessee's chances of winning.
Yeah, I get what you're saying. The 8-9 matchup, the winner of that having to go travel to, one of these Big Ten juggernauts is not ideal. And it really seems like, I just have a hard time seeing there'd have to be, A&M would have to beat Texas and Notre Dame would have to lose for Tennessee to get to 7, I think. So 2 upsets would have to happen for Tennessee to be in that 7 spot. And then if they're in that 7 spot, they're going to go likely to Athens in the second round.
Well, it won't be there. It'll be neutral site, but
but
your point still stands.
Yeah,
you would need to get all the way up to the 6th seed for it to truly make a big difference in who you play in the second game, which isn't going to happen.
Call me crazy. If I'm Tennessee, I'd rather play Oregon or Ohio State in the second round than Georgia.
No, I don't think that's crazy. Tennessee has had no success against Georgia.
I don't want
the reverse of it would be is if I'm Tennessee, I'd much rather play Texas than Ohio State or Oregon, and it could be Texas in that spot.
I agree.
What a defensive battle that would be, no doubt.
Yeah, battle of the UTs, all the narratives. Yeah. Anyway, fun field. All the tensions kind of shifted towards not about Tennessee. It feels like we said, winning in, and it didn't feel like that was going to be the case at all. It felt Tennessee was going to be a bubble team when all was said and done, and how's it going to shake up? All the drama's really subsided here, given all the chaos that has reigned elsewhere, and now the attention's really, I think it'll come down to, not regarding Tennessee, but that last spot in the playoff. It'll be the ACC title game loser versus a 9-3 Alabama team, and I have no idea which way the committee's going to go when you're comparing 11-2 SMU versus 9-3 Alabama, and I have a feeling a lot of people are going to be mad. But
yeah.
Well, the big thing there is, I guess it's 2 questions that I have. If Clemson beats South Carolina this weekend, I think Clemson would probably get that spot, right?
I agree.
Over SMU or Bama.
Mm-hmm.
I guess Bama did beat South Carolina at home, but I feel South Carolina, if South Carolina beats Clemson, I'm curious to see if they'll jump Alabama. I feel like they'd have a good case for it.
They would, but I just think the head-to-head will matter in the end.
Yeah, and I think the committee likes what they like. But I felt like watching the rankings come out last night, which, by the way, came out much later than I expected. Not only did I think there was going to be the original, it was going to be the original start time at 7, but then it got pushed back to 8:30 because of that basketball game. I didn't feel like there was a ton for people to get mad at necessarily. Now, if we were a Big 12 podcast, we'd probably have a lot of talking points today. Or if we were an Alabama podcast, I think we'd have a lot there. But I do think that, not yesterday, but last Saturday was just such a big day in the college football landscape that it did even out a lot of things kind of in that top 8. And that top 4 really hasn't changed in a while. And not that it's going to until conference championship weekend. So Yeah, for Tennessee, like last weekend, I think we talked 30 plus minutes about just the seeding and all the different possibilities that could be and everything like that. This week, it's just, hey, Tennessee did what they needed to do. They got themselves into a playoff spot. You just got to go out there and beat Vanderbilt. But, Ryan, as we talked about on the press pass last weekend after the game, there's nobody in the world who wants to beat Tennessee more than Vanderbilt on this particular weekend in the mid-state. So still a lot on the line, but I didn't really feel like this one was too, I don't know, controversial, too chaotic. Just
Nope.
it felt like, felt like pretty standard of a rankings release, at least especially in comparison to how chaotic the last few have been.
Yeah, not really a drama night for not a dramatic night for Tennessee last night whatsoever. Let's move on to that matchup. Tennessee at Vanderbilt in Nashville this weekend. Everybody knows Vanderbilt's a little bit different than most Vanderbilt teams this year. 6-5 record started off, with a Georgia State loss early in the year. You think it's same old Vandy, even after an impressive overtime win over Va Tech. But then played Missouri really tough. Should have won that game on the road. And of course, the Bama upset loss, controlled a game against Kentucky and Lexington. Almost beat Texas in Nashville, so they played really well in the middle part of the season. Not so much as of late. Road win at Auburn was ugly, but got it done. But the last two games, blowout loss to South Carolina, probably the worst loss for Vandy in conference play, worst they've looked anyway. And then, played LSU tight in Baton Rouge last weekend. But I thought it was an LSU team that's obviously been slipping and struggling. Thought that was one Vandy could maybe get. They covered, but ultimately lost the game. So maybe it's a Vandy team that's not playing its absolute best ball right now, but it's still a Vandy team that is quarterback that can play at a really high level, and it's a giant killer. Vandy is a giant killer, and that's their motto. And this game means a lot for them. Sure, the Commodores are already bowl eligible, but this obviously means a lot, Ryan.
Yeah, for sure. It's I would say this would maybe I don't know, maybe I'm wrong on this. I think this would be for Vanderbilt their biggest win of the season, even bigger than beating Alabama.
Yeah.
Yeah, so it's a Vanderbilt team. You're right. I think you hit the nail on the head. They played really well in the middle of the season. Won 4 out of 5 games. Won 4 out of 6 games, with 2 of those losses being, like you said, in overtime to Missouri, in a game they played really well against Texas. So they were playing very well in that stretch. And they lost close to LSU last week, but it also didn't. It felt like LSU controlled that game, at least
Yep.
from what I watched, and more just kind of keeping up with it while watching some of the other night games. But I think the thing that, to me, this just feels like it'll be an excruciating game for Tennessee and Tennessee fans. Like, Vanderbilt plays ball control. They don't turn the ball over. They just play close games for the most part. Just the style of play that they have. It shortens the game by how much they run the ball, kind of with that triple option-esque style from the shotgun. They've been underdogs 8 times this season. They're 7-1 against the spread in those 8 games. They're 4-4 outright in those games. So while this is an 11-point game or 11-point spread, I think that's at least where it opened at. I think it's around there still. I think this is going to be a very challenging game for Tennessee, and one I'd be surprised if it's not tighter than that, late in the second half.
Yeah. We talked about this early in the season that after the Alabama game, it was, Vandy is definitely the second most challenging game remaining on Tennessee's schedule without a question. And of course, Georgia being one at the time. And now here it is. Rick, I just think you look at this game and what Diego Pavia brings to the table. I like Tennessee's defense in any matchup really still, even, Tennessee was largely ineffective in Athens, but I still like Tennessee's defense in any sort of matchup in the trenches. And I think, Tennessee will be able to have success there. But, Diego Pavia is a type of quarterback that's given Tennessee defenses troubles in recent years.
He is fun to watch. He's an exciting quarterback. He is all over the place. He's a gritty. He's a tough guy. He's going to keep Vanderbilt in the game. I really do believe that. My 3 kind of keys going into this game, an ode to Russell Smith, if you will. Start fast, maximize possessions, and then win early on defense. First 2 of those go more towards the offensive side of the ball. The last one goes towards defense. Diego Pavia is a guy who can not only create plays, but also extend plays. And does a very good job at that. You saw it against Alabama and you saw it against Texas. I think that Tennessee's got to be able to win early on the early downs on defense, create some of those third and longs. There's no better, to me at least, there's no better opportunity to run if you're the quarterback than when it is 3rd and 2, 3rd and 3, 3rd and short. You're just trying to get over to the line. You're just trying to give yourself a fresh set of downs. If that maybe is extended back out to about a 3rd and 9, a 3rd and 10, something in the 3rd and long range, I think that does take away a little bit of that element. Now, Pavia is good enough to be able to go and still convert those types of plays, but I think that Tennessee can do a big help for themselves by winning the early downs on defense, by being able to bring pressure and attack that quarterback. But when you bring pressure and you're looking at a quarterback who is so mobile, who does have a really good ability to scramble. Look, you've heard us say it. You've certainly heard Josh Heupel say it. I feel like it might be one of his most broken record comments of the year so far. Granted, Tennessee has faced a couple of good mobile quarterbacks, but you got to keep your lane integrity. You got to keep your gap integrity strong. All that kind of stuff that they've been talking about in the press conferences. So I think that Diego Pavia is really good. I'm excited to watch him with my own two eyes tonight on Saturday in Nashville. But I think that Tennessee can do a lot for themselves if they win those early downs, force them into a little bit of a situation that they might not love as much. Ryan, I'll ask you what you think about that as we as we work to get Jack Foster back here.
Yeah, I agree with it. I mean, it's Pavia's got a little bit of Matt Corral in him. That's the comparison I would go with.
Yeah, I can see that.
I think Corral obviously torched Tennessee with his legs in 21. Now Tennessee is a much different defense now than they were in Josh Heupel's first season. And like you made a good point. Tennessee's faced a lot of running quarterbacks this year, and Tennessee has mostly been good against those running quarterbacks. Like Tennessee has not really gotten torched on scrambles this year or designed quarterback runs. And the one offense that really did torch him was by far the most pro style offense that Tennessee has faced. So, I agree with a lot of what you said. I would, you said force Vanderbilt in the 3rd and longs. I think these two things tie together. But to me, it's just getting off the field on 3rd downs. Vanderbilt's such a ball control team. They don't create a lot of big plays typically, or offensively, a bunch of chunk plays. So Tennessee's got to be able to get off the field to get Pavia down when they're rushing the passer and when they're getting to him in the backfield. So I think that'll be big. The one thing that I do think is a tough matchup there is just that we saw Georgia torch Tennessee throwing the ball to their tight ends over the middle, and Eli Stowers is Vanderbilt's leading receiver. I think he's got about 650 yards this season. Has been really good. I think it's receptions, yards, and receiving touchdowns. He leads Vanderbilt. So Tennessee's linebackers, Tennessee's safeties are going to need to be better in coverage in this game than they were in those games. And I think that can be particularly challenging in some of the triple option stuff Vanderbilt runs, where you think it's a run play, you think it's an option play, and then you kind of sneak Stowers out over the middle, and you can hit him there.
Nobody steals my points better than Ryan. That was very expertly said right there. And I had the same thing. The thing that I was going to follow that up with is just saying, I'll give you 4 very important numbers for this game: 8, 22, 7, and 39. If you didn't pick up on it, those are Tennessee's linebackers. They're going to be really important in this game, not only for that sort of pass coverage like what you're talking about there, being able to play a little bit more with the secondary, but also just being able to play off balance, being able to have that sideline to sideline speed in case Pavia does get out of the pocket. And I say in case, he's going to at several points throughout this game. So Tennessee's linebackers in the middle of the field, I expect to see a lot of rotations, but they're going to have to play. They're going to have to step up. This is going to be a big opportunity for them. Again, you're right, especially after that Georgia game just a couple weeks ago. I'm looking at 8, 22, 7, and 39 as maybe not impact players, but guys who need to play well if you do want to contain that Vanderbilt Commodores offense.
Yeah, it was a perfect point. Pointing out the tight end there. I mean, that's something Tennessee obviously struggled with in Athens.
No doubt.
Eli Stowers on the season, 44 catches, 568 yards, and 4 tuds. So he's a playmaker, and he's one Tennessee is going to have to focus on, no doubt. My internet cut out a tad bit there for a second, so I don't know if you guys mentioned this, but, Vanderbilt is a team that's, really good at taking care of the football. And, I feel like maybe that's something that, Tennessee can kind of flip the script on in this game. I don't know, but if Tennessee can obviously force turnovers, that's an important part in any game. But this is a Vanderbilt team that doesn't really make mistakes with the football offensively. Only 6 total turnovers, and that's the least of any team in the SEC. So that's something I'm looking at as well. That if Vandy has turnovers, I obviously think it's going to be very tough for them to pull off the upset, and that's just uncharacteristic with how Vandy plays. They play a very clean brand, balanced offensive football. But if Tennessee can force some turnovers, especially pressuring Pavia, maybe force him to make some mistakes, that'll be huge in a game like this.
100%, and I think that's the thing that maybe stands out most of about Vanderbilt's offense is they just maximize their opportunities. They don't really have many yards. Like, if you just look purely statistically, one of the worst offenses in the SEC. They don't run the ball particularly well. They don't throw the ball particularly well, but they don't make mistakes. They play a lot of ball control. They're good on third downs, and they're really good in the red zone, which to me is a huge battle in this game. I think Vanderbilt scored on like 36 of 38 trips to the red zone. They have touchdowns on 28 of those 38 trips, and very, very balanced. I think it's something like maybe 16 rushing touchdowns, 12 passing touchdowns in the red zone. Which obviously is a big part of being so effective, is they have that balance that Tennessee really doesn't have, and a lot of teams don't have, that Tennessee's faced in the SEC this year. So obviously Tennessee's red zone defense has been really good, and Tennessee's third down defense has been really good besides the Georgia game. I think if those two things can continue, or like you said, Jack, the big X factor would be to force some turnovers. If Tennessee can excel in like 2 of those 3, I think their defense will have a really big day, because I don't see Vanderbilt scoring a bunch of 60-yard, 50-yard touchdowns on Tennessee's defense.
I'm with both of you on this point. I think that's one of the big points to hit when you're looking at and you're previewing this game. I talked about it, maximizing possessions. That's not only on the offensive side of the ball, but that's also what Vanderbilt does on the defensive side of the ball. Ryan, I think you might have just used that exact phrase. I wrote down in my notes here, and just to keep it very plainly and simple, Tennessee might not have a ton of possessions in this game, so you can't get rid of any. Whether that's a Dylan Sampson fumble that's kind of plagued him in the midst of this incredible, unbelievable, historic season. If you're Nico Iamaleava, you can't be turning the ball over. Tennessee, I don't believe, and Ryan, I think this goes back to what you said at the beginning of the podcast. Tennessee might not have as many possessions as they like to have, certainly on any given Saturday. This might be a game where Josh Heupel gets a little bit frustrated at just not having as many possessions. Tennessee certainly can't afford to give any away through a turnover. On the flip side, Tennessee can maybe grab an opportunity for more possessions in the game if you know it's going to be a low possession count by getting turnover to themselves. Tennessee, I believe, has had 5 turnovers in the last 4 games. A couple against UTEP last weekend right there in Neyland Stadium. So I think the possession battle is a big talking point heading into this game. Kind of opposite teams in the way they want to do it, but if you're Tennessee, just got to maximize your own possessions. Don't be turning over the ball. Don't be giving away yards. Don't be giving away possessions. See what you can do to try to get yourself points on the board.
And Ryan, so you talked about third down defense earlier for the other side of the ball, for Tennessee, but third down defense for Vanderbilt has been terrible this season, worst in the league. So we talk about Tennessee, making the most of its possessions. I think Tennessee will be able to stay on the field for a lot of its possessions because of Vandy's third down defense woes. Vandy's opponents in the SEC converting 45.8% of third down attempts. And obviously Vanderbilt's pass rush hasn't been great. So that'll bode well for Nico to have plenty of time in the pocket and to make some of those key third down throws.
For sure. I think it's an interesting dichotomy for me kind of going into this game. So I think there's going to be some plays there for Tennessee in the pass game. Vanderbilt's pass defense has struggled at times this year, and largely talk about a third down defense struggling, the pass defense struggling. I think a big part of it is the pass rush. So Nico should have time in this game to throw and have time for some plays to develop down the field. So hitting those would obviously be big, and you'd circle that. I also feel like this is just going to be a Dylan Sampson. Just give Dylan Sampson the ball over and over and over, more. He had 11 carries last week. He's your best player. You're a game away from making the playoffs. Few things on your offense have consistently worked this season. Don't have
to play a championship game next week and potentially.
Yeah,
so you
exactly.
Got some time
you have a few
weeks.
you have a few weeks off, even with a win. And ode to Rick making bold predictions that aren't bold. I don't know how bold this prediction is, but I'll say Dylan Sampson.
That was so disrespectful, Jack. That was so. Can you believe you just said that? Go ahead. Go ahead.
Wait, Ryan, let's do a Rick bold prediction for a Dylan Sampson stat line. All right.
Okay.
All right. Rick's bold prediction for a D-Samp stat line: 20 carries, 100 yards, and 2 touchdowns.
I wasn't gonna disrespect him that bad. I would say
World.
the Rick bold prediction would be like 25 for 120 and 2 touchdowns. My bold prediction, which isn't super bold, but I guess it is bold. I say Dylan Sampson gets 30 carries in this game.
Was I not the one who boldly projected that Tennessee have a new sack leader by the end of the year? That hasn't even remotely come close to being true. I am the bold predictor of the three of us. I might have had a less than bold prediction a couple weeks ago, but I feel like that's sticking with me a little bit too much. It's creating a false narrative about what I actually bring to the table here in this RTI Press Pass podcast.
Rick,
in fairness, it wasn't in the podcast. It was
that's
in
right.
your game.
It was on game predictions.
I never would have known it.
I said that Tennessee
I never would have known
hold,
about it if you didn't bring it up.
I said that Tennessee would hold the SEC's last place team to less than 20 points. That one, okay, all right. I can see that one.
Not great, Bob.
I appreciate the stray. I do. I'll get you back.
Yeah. I'll Rick, just know you're not alone with that Pierce prediction though. Someone else in in Tennessee media projected him to be the not only just he predicted James Pierce to basically have like 20 sacks this year. So you're not alone. There's people out there like you who are just so
put it
bold.
in the chat. Who said
and
it?
by bold asterisk just
Ryan, put it in the chat.
Nonsense is what it was. A nonsense prediction, not a bold prediction.
Yeah, it was a nonsense prediction.
All right, so discuss some keys. Let's do some quick fill in the blanks. Ryan, Tennessee blows out Vanderbilt if blank.
Tennessee blows out Vanderbilt if they. I'll say I think it's gonna be a hard to blow out game, but I'll say two things: they force some turnovers and they hit some big plays offensively. I think either one of these on like the dramatic end of the spectrum could lead a blowout. Vanderbilt turns it over 3 times. Tennessee hits 6 plays of over 25 yards in the passing game. Like I think either one of those on its own could be a blowout, lead to a blowout. I don't think either of those things happen, so it's kind of a mix of all right. Tennessee hits 2 touchdowns, passes of over 30 yards in this game, and then they force 2 turnovers or something like that. I think if you blend those things, that's the path to Tennessee winning in convincing fashion.
Rick, Tennessee gets a blowout victory, skating into the playoffs if blank.
Yeah, I'm with Ryan. I first off, I don't think a blowout victory is going to come unless you do get some sort of advantage in the possessions battle, just going back and forth. So I do think that turnovers would play. I also think that Tennessee has to start fast if you want to be able to blow them out. I know that Tennessee put up 28 points in the second quarter last week against the Miners, but they also put up 0 in the first quarter. If you looked on Twitter in the first quarter last weekend, people were saying that Tennessee wasn't even a playoff team anymore. So that's how, how much people are looking at that. But I do think that that's important for Tennessee. I don't think that Vanderbilt is a team that you want to necessarily let hang around. They're good enough to keep hanging around themselves no matter what you do or what you try not to do. So I think that that's going to be, that's something to note. But I just think that if Tennessee is able to start fast, if they're able to get the crowd who is on their side into the game and really loud in that stadium, I think that helps. I think the game not being at night helps Tennessee a little bit. But starting fast to me is big in this game. If Tennessee wants to grow a lead, expand a lead, and then eventually turn to their defense and say, hey, you know what to do. Go do what you've done all season. So I do think that the turnovers are part of it, and if Tennessee wants to get that 3-score lead or so. But I also think that Tennessee's offense has to start fast and faster than just a 28-point second quarter. Put some points up in the first quarter. Show the college football landscape that, hey, you can make that happen. And they were close last weekend. They missed they missed the play to Squirrel White. I think there was another deep pass that they missed. So they were close last weekend. But those are opportunities that if you're a playoff team, you got to go hit.
I completely agree. And I think, maybe obviously to blow out, but I just think that's just one of the keys to Tennessee to win. I mean, you look at the Alabama game for Vanderbilt, the Virginia Tech game for Vanderbilt, the two games where there were big surprise victories. They got big leads, or at least comfortable leads in the first half of that game, of both those games. So I think that's a huge thing. I don't know how well Vanderbilt's offense is built to play from behind either. I think that's not that they just can't do it, but when you look at a ball control team, a possession team, I think that presents putting them on their heels and making them change some things offensively is a good path just for Tennessee to winning, and certainly if they're going to blow them out.
Yeah, just not necessarily along the blowout lines, but I look to just how Vandy won, the game against Alabama. You talk about getting off to a big lead, sure, but the type of team Alabama is just so reliant on Jalen Milroe. And while you can argue, yes, Tennessee is just so reliant on Dylan Sampson, I do think Tennessee's a more balanced offense than Alabama, right? Like Nico can still make some plays. He's been playing better. And of course, Dylan Sampson's a total stud, better than, any skill position player Alabama has. So I think Tennessee is more comparable to Texas in that way, in that neither offense has been that impressive this year, but both are pretty balanced. Texas has that 1-2 punch at running back, which is pretty solid. No, it's decent, but like still solid. And yours is a tad better than Nico this year, but not overwhelmingly better. So I think this game could play out really similar to the way the Texas game played out. Each quarterback threw 2 picks at pop. I don't know if that happens, but I think you see Texas or Tennessee always kind of leading by 7 to 14 points, right? Score 2 scores, and then Vandy could make it interesting late. Vandy had a great fourth quarter against Texas, scored to cut the lead to 3, and
Yep.
we're an onside away from potentially going down and tying the football game. You could see something like that against Tennessee. I have a hard time seeing Vandy score 40, obviously, on Tennessee, which is what they were able to do on Alabama. So I think that Texas Vandy game could be really similar to what we see this weekend, as long as Vandy brings its, at least B+ game defensively, because Vandy's defense did play well in that game.
That game took place during Tennessee's bye week, didn't it? The second one, the late October bye week, because I remember being at home watching that game.
Week before Kentucky, yeah.
That's right, yeah.
Yep.
Yeah.
So, yeah, obviously everything
Ryan,
you guys... Go ahead, Ray.
Question for you, just, obviously we know that Tennessee fans, they like to go to the mid-state for this game. We know that there is a gigantic
Contingent.
Thank you. I was looking for the word of Tennessee fans in the mid-state already. But so from what we've heard, obviously the Vanderbilt fan base is kind of firing up. They've obviously enjoyed this season a lot more than past seasons. How do you see the crowd shaping out? Do you still see this being primarily Tennessee? Do you see a little bit more balance than what we've normally seen in the past? Obviously, a lot of people are getting fired up for this game on the Commodore side. What do you see about the crowd? If you've got any sort of thought or idea or prediction there.
Yeah, I'm pretty curious about it. Obviously, the ticket prices are super, super expensive, and I think even if Vanderbilt was bad, the ticket prices would be expensive for Tennessee, just a chance to make the college football playoff with a win. But I think this expensive makes me think that more Vanderbilt fans are keeping their tickets, not selling them. So, but I will say the big thing is, Vanderbilt's student body, they're all going to be in the East Coast at home for Thanksgiving. Vanderbilt doesn't have a whole lot of students from Southeast, so I think Vanderbilt will be down a lot of, won't have the student turnout they typically do. I lean towards thinking it'll be like around 70-30 Tennessee split. I mean, a lot of times it's 75-25, 80-20. I've heard some people say this week that like the 98 game was like 90 Tennessee or 90-10 Tennessee fans compared to Vanderbilt fans. But I lean towards thinking 70-30, maybe 65-35.
If Tennessee clinches a playoff spot in Nashville this weekend and they do it at like 4:00 p.m., which is around when it would be, let me tell you, Broadway is going to be just flooded with orange that night. I do think that some people will go home and go back to Knoxville. I'm going to try myself, but I think that downtown Nashville is going to be absolutely flooded with orange if Tennessee clinches their first playoff berth here against the Commodores. So a lot on the line and certainly a big rivalry matchup to do so in.
No doubt
certainly.
about it. All right, before we get into a little bit of hoops talk, spread's 11. What are you guys looking at for this game? Don't have to give a score prediction, but Just kind of where you at.
I think it's going to be an excruciating game for Tennessee fans. Just a truly miserable experience.
You
I
have
mean,
to
the only
earn this
thing
clinch.
The only thing that's good for Tennessee fans with this game is that it kicks off at 12 Eastern time. I mean, if this was a 7:30 game, and I didn't just imagine, I mean, it's a good recipe to die of a heart attack because Vanderbilt is going to be down by 4 with the football late in the fourth quarter of this game with Tennessee's college football playoff hopes on the line. Again, luckily for Tennessee fans, this will be at like 2:45 instead of 11:45 at night. Because and they're going to
Like
be a little
A&M
less
and
liquored
Auburn
up, I
last
would
weekend.
imagine, with an early game compared to if it was a night game. But I think this is going to be just a close game. Like, what Tennessee would have to do things that they have not done consistently that would have been uncharacteristic, like good things, a lot of being really efficient in the red zone, hitting a lot of big plays, or Vanderbilt would have to do something that's been very uncharacteristic and turning the ball over a lot for me to see this game being like just a really comfortable Tennessee win. So I do think Tennessee wins this game, but I think it's going to – I like Vanderbilt to cover. I think it's going to be a one-score game in a game that you're not feeling good or you're not feeling relieved or comfortable if you're a Tennessee fan until, the clock strikes 0.
Yeah,
I agree.
I also agree. I don't have much to add. Those are he hit the good talking points, I should say. So I agree. I think that Vanderbilt will cover. We'll see what happens.
I may give Tennessee a 10-point win when it's said and done, but yeah, I think Vandy is competitive throughout. Like I said, I think you see a game very similarly to that Texas game in Nashville. Similar score too. I don't know if either team scores 30. I think you could see 27-17 is maybe what is going to be my score prediction. We'll see. But
Jack, that's what I wrote down right there. 27-17. Tennessee has won a game 25-15. They've won a game 28-18. I think that this is the 27-17. I think they put that one right in the middle and continue a weird trend of winning scores from this season. 25-15, 28-18. I think this one's 27-17. And frankly, I kind of hope it is. That would be cool.
That would be funny.
well, there you have it. All right, let's get into some hoops talk. This is more of y'all's thing, of course, as we've done past couple pods, but Tennessee coming off a trip down to the Bahamas, going 2-0, 2 dominant wins, really, over Virginia and Baylor. Baylor being a good ranked win for the Vols. Tennessee tips off against UT Martin later today. Big one in TBAAFCC. Some are saying in-state rivalry. Battle of the UTs.
Yeah.
Not really, obviously, but UT Martin, West Tennessee represent. Either one of y'all, you can start. Just kind of what'd you see out of Rick Barnes' squad over there in the Bahamas? As I mentioned, some dominant basketball being on display.
Here's what I saw out of Rick Barnes' teams in the Bahamas.
Chaz Lanier, for those listening.
Chaz Lanier in bold, big letters. He was phenomenal. I just wanted to make that joke, but he is named tournament MVP after Tennessee claims the championship. 26 points against Virginia, 25 against Baylor, 5 of 5 to start the game. He outscored Baylor in the first half himself. And that 5 of 5 was from three-point line. He was phenomenal. He was one of the most fun players to watch across the whole college basketball feast week this week. And this has been a good feast week, but he certainly set the tone over there in the Bahamas. He was tremendous. There's a lot more to get to about Tennessee basketball. I'll let Ryan dive into some of the injury or maybe more about Chaz Lanier. But I wanted to start off and just say, look at that. Look at that. He was phenomenal for Tennessee from a scoring department over the weekend in the Bahamas.
For sure. And I think maybe, connected to that, to me, one of the big takeaways is that Tennessee's offense played well or had good performances when Zakai Ziegler either didn't play well, probably I'd say truly did not play well in the first half of the Virginia game, and then the next 3 halves just didn't shoot well, didn't score a whole lot. So to me, that's a really encouraging sign. That was a big question I had about Tennessee. I thought they might just kind of offensively go as Zakai goes. So to see him not make shots in Tennessee's offense, still have some good outputs, I think is a really good sign. And certainly Chaz Lanier is the main culprit or the main reason why that was able to still happen. Rick mentioned the injuries on that front. Cam Carr out 4 to 6 weeks after dislocating his finger in the Austin P game. I think Austin P was the game before they went to the Bahamas. So he's out for a little while.
Correct.
JP Estrella is out for the season with a left foot injury, having to have season-ending surgery on that. So I think kind of tying, and Estrella didn't play in the Bahamas, but tying those things together. Darlington Dubar made his debut, and I think Tennessee's going to ask a lot more of him now than they would have otherwise. And, look, I wrote it in kind of a notebook style article after the tournament that, one of my takeaways, I think Dubar might be a better fit for what this team needs as opposed to Cam Carr. Like, I think Cam Carr's ceiling is way higher. He's a more talented scorer. He's going to be, in his totality of his basketball career, a better player than Darlington Dubar. But Carr's a little inconsistent offensively, a little bit inconsistent right now. Struggles at times defensively, not great rebounding. Dubar's a really good rebounder. He's good physical guy, good cleaning up the trash around the rim, capable of hitting open shots, playing good defense. Like, I think when you're asking that guy to play 10, 12 minutes a game, Dubar, it could be really solid for this team. So that was one of the things that stood out. Cade Phillips played well in both games. Obviously, he's going to be leaned on a lot with JP Estrella out for the rest of the season. So a good sign for a thin Tennessee team that had some guys on the bench step up and give them a lot of good minutes in the two games in the Bahamas.
It's hard not to like the physicality that Dubar brings to the table, and you can see that not only on TV, but we get to see it on the practice court whenever we do get to go see the Tennessee basketball practices. He's built well. He's built like a tank. I tweeted it out during one of the games, but he might be the person that I'd least like to go up against in a rebounding battle because he would just break me in half. He is so strong and he uses physicality well. Excited to see how Tennessee continues to use that as they go on and as they get him more worked into the rotation and worked into just that game speed and game conditioning. But a lot of positive takeaways from that tournament win in the Bahamas. And then, hey, you get the tournament win by beating Baylor. Now, I know that Baylor is going to – I say this because I have family members who are Baylor Bears, so this is what they told me after the game. But Baylor will kind of say, hey, we just had a huge tournament-like win the night before, and it's hard to get that on back-to-back days. Well, Tennessee was up until 1 o'clock in the morning just on the court the day before, so they had a tough turnaround as well. Tennessee absolutely blitzed Baylor out of the game. Baylor's ranked number 13 in the country, or at least they were for that game. I mean, that was a really impressive win. Again, I understand that Tennessee took advantage of a Baylor team that had just come across a gigantic last-second double overtime win against St. John's. But Tennessee was not really in an advantageous spot themselves. I think Rick Barnes said after the first game, those guys weren't even going to go to bed until about 3 o'clock in the morning. Well, that next game was played less than 18 hours after that, less than 18 hours before they went to sleep for the night. So I think just for Tennessee to come out and do what they did last Friday against Baylor was incredibly impressive, and I think a good testament to this team that, yes, they're missing some of the seniors and some of the leadership that they've had in the past, but winning a game like that with that kind of turnaround tells me that there is still a very strong culture in the building, and there's a lot of guys who want to come out and play their best. So I was very encouraged from what I saw from Tennessee basketball last weekend.
For sure, and I think in a lot of ways the games went probably perfect for Rick Barnes, where Tennessee, in 4 halves, they played 2 halves, so they just frankly weren't very good, and they still earned 2 blowout wins. So that's big. I think the Baylor aspect, I think that's a win that could look a lot better by the end of the season. Baylor hasn't been great to this point in the year. They got destroyed by Gonzaga in the opener. They've won pretty close games against Arkansas and St. John's, who, are solid teams, but I don't think great teams. But a lot of talent on that Baylor team, and I would bet they'll be a lot better when March rolls around than they're playing right now, and that could end up being one of the big banner wins on Tennessee's resume.
No doubt.
It's hard to make any Dalton Connect comparisons or anything like that, especially a year later, and people are naturally going to want to do it because of the recency of DK being at Tennessee. But do you think that Chaz Lanier can be similar to Dalton Connect in that he can just be the guy that is the absolute heartbeat of the team and can bring Tennessee back and just take over games? Like, Dalton Connect had a crazy ability to just completely take over and dominate. Do you think Chaz Lanier has that upside? I'm not saying he's going to be Dalton Connect, but do you think he has the upside to take over games for Tennessee and for it to be a one-man show if it's needed?
Yes and no. Like, yes, I think he has the ability to take over games. I mean, we saw him kind of do it twice last week in the
Right.
second half of the Virginia game and the first half of the Baylor game. I don't know if he can do it as much as a one-man show element because I just think his game is he doesn't have that ISO ability that Dalton had. Like the Dalton was special, and I don't think Chaz really has that. So I think it's going to need to be so much of a Dalton takeover was all right. Get the ball to Dalton, everybody else get the F out of the way. Like I think Chaz, you're going to have to continue to run your offense and run him off a lot of screens and stuff like that to try to get him open looks. But yeah, I think that's possible, and I think that same element makes it where you won't be able to see it. You won't see it night in, night out. Like I think Chaz, once you get into SEC play, like his down games, I think will be a lot worse than Dalton's down games. But I do think the ceiling and the ability to hit 6 or 7 threes and score 25 points is definitely there.
I think that's the thought right there. Yes, he can have these big breakout games, but even you look at that Baylor game, I mean, he scored 25 first half points, 0 in the second half, right? That's not something that Dalton did too often, at least that I can remember. But you're also talking about it's hard to make that comparison. And I think that Ryan's right. I don't think that Lanier is going to be necessarily as consistent or, he does have the ability. How did you phrase it? He does have the ability to have a couple more, maybe not stinkers, but just not as good games as that. You're talking about a guy who is dominating the NBA right now. And I say dominating in context, right? For a rookie on a team with other superstars, I believe he's second in the league right now in Rookie of the Year odds behind Jared McCain from the Philadelphia 76ers. So you're talking about a guy who yes, he slid number 17 in the NBA draft, but he is not the 17th best rookie in that class, not by a long shot. So it is. But you're right. I mean, everybody's talking about Dalton Connect when you see a good shooter for Tennessee.
Yeah.
And that's the comparison that people will make even years from now. Like, oh well, can this guy be their Dalton Connect? From 2023. So.
It's not just Tennessee either. I mean, it's
the guy
the
from the
entire
transfer
country.
portal.
Really good transfer. It's like who's going to be the Dalton Connect this year?
Yeah. So I think that it's funny to keep seeing how much Dalton Connect's name is brought back up, but it is exciting to see what he's doing with LA, and it is good to see Chaz Lanier kind of stepping up into that shooter's role. But also, for as good as that first half was against Baylor, I believe he went over 3 in the second half. So you still want to see a little bit more of that consistency. And I know that he would and Rick Barnes would as well. So still a lot on the table for this Tennessee team, but I like the early start.
Let's wrap with this. Oh, go ahead, Ryan. One more.
Well, this is kind of a wrapping thing too. But I'm just saw this on X and wanted to share it, and it's not related to Tennessee at all, but it is wild. One of my new favorite accounts. No, it's not John Fante. You can't redeem the call.
We should have played that.
Rogers Ayers ref tracker become one of my favorite accounts on Twitter. Roger Ayers, 23 games in 23 days to open the season, 14 different states. He's traveled over 20,000 miles already. When will Roger Ayers have a day off is the question that I am asking.
Warrior.
Wow.
He is.
Wow, he is a workhorse. I don't know if we can give you that answer, Ryan, but maybe
props to Raj.
Yeah, maybe good friend of the show, Kevin. The last name is
Kevin Sweeney.
Kevin Sweeney. Maybe he might know for you, friend of the program. I don't know. That's crazy. If you get that answer, we would like to know. When is he?
Yeah, no, more.
When is he going to get a day off?
Yeah, more hypothetical.
I know, but the people want to know. I think that's going to be the big question coming out of
the Roger Ayers ref tracker. That's the account to follow at Ayers ref tracker on X.
That's
incredible.
He
tells you where he's at every day. What's that?
Ayers?
Ayers. Yep.
Like Robert Ayers.
That's fun. All right, last thing here. Thanksgiving Eve. You guys get one main Thanksgiving food and 2 side dishes. What are you choosing?
You want me to go first, Rick? You seem like you're deep in thought on this one.
I'm looking over at the kitchen right now to see what we have out.
Yeah, I mean, you keep the main thing. I know there's a lot of turkey haters out there. I personally like turkey. I think turkey's good.
Jason Jenkins, a turkey hater, we learned yesterday.
Jason Jenkins, a turkey hater. Alyssa Lang had a big thing hating on turkey yesterday. And yeah, no, sure, steak is better than turkey, so that was fair. But I think turkey's good. I enjoy turkey. And I'll say stuffing, because I think stuffing / dressing, whatever you want to call it, I think that's really good. You don't really ever get it besides Thanksgiving.
Yeah.
So I'll say those two things and a good sweet potato casserole. I love a good sweet potato casserole.
That's my favorite Thanksgiving food. So
yeah, it's mine. It's my favorite side for sure.
while Rick finishes his thoughts, mine is easy: turkey, mashed potatoes, sweet potato casserole. Big potato guy, obviously, but mashed potatoes and sweet potato casserole with turkey, give me that.
It's the bread and butter right there
Yeah.
of Thanksgiving.
Well, speaking of bread, I think that's a staple. You got to have the bread, so I'm not even going to add that to my sides. But I do like to make the sandwich when needed. I'm going to also say turkey, but the thing about the turkey is it's got to be good gravy. The gravy has to be good.
Which is a good point by Alyssa in her rant. It is a little dependent on the gravy, which is a fair criticism of turkey.
Well, I think that turkey is where it is, but it can really be elevated by the gravy. So I think that that's important. And otherwise, I mean, God, you guys took some good ones, so I'm not going to take any of those. I'm just going to say I'm going to say green beans and mac and cheese. I think that, to me,
well, this is
it's a little simple.
No, this is like
it might belong at the children's table. I understand that, at the little kiddie table, but I'm taking the green beans and the mac and cheese. Now I still want the stuffing. I still want. Now I'm not a sweet potato guy. We talked about this at lunch last week, but give me the green beans and mac and cheese. I don't care. I don't care if it belongs at the kiddie table. I want as much of it as I can. So those are two of my must-have sides. I got to have green beans and mac and cheese.
Well, I don't have this written down like Rick likes to write things down to prove that the point was not adjusted. But Rick, I don't mean this just to pick on you, because I was going to say it before. Mac and cheese does not belong at Thanksgiving. Not a Thanksgiving food. It's what are we doing here? What are we doing? You don't need the mac and cheese at Thanksgiving. It's good, so I guess I can't hate that much because it is good. You already have 3 other sides that are Thanksgiving sides that are in the starch category. I think a sweet potato is a starch too, but the stuffing, the mashed potatoes, you don't need the mac and cheese too. It's overboard, and it is a little childish, as Rick said.
You don't always need I'm not talking necessarily about the Velveeta shells on the stovetop, right? I'm talking about a little bit more of like an elegant. You put it in the crock pot, maybe a bacon mac and cheese. I get what he's saying. Something a little bit more gourmet that you actually got to cook. But if you also gave me the Velveeta shells, I'd be okay with that too. I really would. So I think that those two are mandatory. You're right. It's not the highlight of the sides. It's not even the thing that you first dive into. But I just say that I need them both on my plate in addition to what else I'm having. So those have stuck with me.
And as you were talking, I think I realized that I'm a hypocrite because we've never had mac and cheese growing up. But I want to say your crockpot comment made me think of it. I want to say last year my brother's girlfriend brought mac and cheese to Thanksgiving, and I did eat it. So
and you're right. Well, and
I don't know if she's coming this year.
You're always
going to. I don't think she listens to the pod. So I think
Ryan, I will be there. I will be there. Just know that set me aside a seat tomorrow. I told you this last week, and I will be there at the Schumpert family Thanksgiving meal tomorrow. Just let me know what time, and if we could arrange it around the Cowboys, that would be great.
Well, I know that not every. We eat right in the first half of the Cowboys game typically, and I know you don't like watching the Cowboys this year. So,
hey,
all right,
big win last week.
I'll see you guys in Nashville.
The boys are back, Rick. What are you talking about?
We don't want to be back. We don't want to be back.
Might as well be. You already paid your quarterback. Might as well win. All right, that'll wrap up this Thanksgiving Eve edition of the Racked Up Insider Press Pass podcast. That's Ryan Shumpert. You can follow him at rshump00, and Rick Butler. You can follow at Rick Butler. I'm at Jack Foster Media if you want to give me a follow as well. At Racked Up Insider is the follow on all social media platforms. And of course, follow along with all of your Tennessee athletics coverage needs on rockedupinsider.com. That's football and basketball, of course, as the seasons are both together right now. Before Ryan and Rick, have a happy Thanksgiving, and we'll see you next week.